very warm welcome and good morning. I'm imagining most of you are either New Zealand or Australian based, given the time of day that it currently is. And a very warm welcome to anyone who is watching the recording later this morning. I know you're with us in spirit, even if you haven't quite made it live. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name's Lynn Lavery. I'm the director of an Auckland-based research company, Academic Consulting, and amongst other things, we teach people how to use NVivo. So I'll share a few different ways that we do that at the end of the session today, but I'm quite keen to get cracking with today's content for our NVivo showcase as part of ResBaz Week. ResBaz is one of the absolute highlights of my year, not just because I get a chance to share some of my favourite things about NVivo with a great group of people, but I'm also a bit of a lifelong learner. And so it's really great to be able to dip in and out of the fabulous sessions on offer. I hope those of you that have been attending ResBaz Week have learnt some new skills along the way, and hopefully you might just pick up a few more this morning in our showcase session. As you will have gathered, I am joined behind the scenes by the fabulous Jane George. Thank you again for joining me this year, Jane. Jane is going to be helping me out in the chat. There's a few resources that we're going to be sharing along the way, and she will also be answering your questions in the Q&A panel. So just for those of you that have joined a little bit late, just a heads up, questions are very, very welcome. We're looking forward to hearing them, but the Q&A panel is definitely the best place to put those, just so that we have our attention drawn to them. The chat might just get a little bit busy. So today's session, my showcase, is aimed at two slightly different audiences. So it is perfect for those of you who are brand new to NVivo. So if you've joined today and you've never used the software before, you are in the right place. But I am also pitching it at folk who have a little bit of experience as well. So I'm going to be, as well as covering the basics, showing you a few of the bells and whistles, some of the things that you might not know that you don't know, so to speak. So both groups of people are really very, very welcome today. If you are more experienced with the software, the upfront stuff, I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about what NVivo actually is. Feel free to multitask for a few minutes while I do that, but then jump back in because I'm sure you will pick up a few more tips along the way if you are a bit more experienced. The other thing I just want to say before I jump across to the software, and today's session is primarily software-based, folks, so I don't have any more slides other than the two that I've shown. We won't be sharing those because they're not going to be very exciting to keep on record, but there are other PDF resources that we are going to be dropping in the chat, and I will be sending that out by email for those that are catching the recording later. But the other thing I just wanted to say quickly is today, as the name suggests, it's a showcase. I'm going to be going quite quickly because I want to fit as many of these great tools into the session as I possibly can. So if the pace is a little bit quick for you, be rest assured you'll be getting access to that recording later and you'll be able to go back over anything that you need. I'm also not expecting anyone will be sitting there clicking away, trying to follow along with me. The pace isn't going to quite suit that. But I've got some suggestions for hands-on learning if you are wanting something that's a little bit more hands-on practical than today's demonstration session. Okay, I would like to jump straight into things and get going with the content. So bear with me, folks. I'm just going to move the various parts of Zoom out the way so that I can show you the software. Okay. Right, we are in NVivo. So let's get cracking. So for those of you that are brand new to the software and you're not quite sure what NVivo is all about, let me just make a few opening comments about what NVivo is useful for. So essentially, NVivo is data analysis software for either qualitative or mixed methods projects. So it will not help you at all if you are just working with numbers. But if you have qualitative information of any kind, so that might be transcripts of focus groups or interviews, you might have policy documents or PDF reports, could be video, audio, social media data, even information from reference management software and note-taking apps can be brought across. So anything that is qualitative in nature, you can work with that in NVivo. It's not the only option, so there are actually a fair number of qualitative data applications available on the market these days, but it is the most widely used internationally, and it's very heavily used in this part of the world. So it was actually developed in Australia by a Kiwi and Australian husband and wife team, Tom and Lynn Richards. So we do tend to use it quite heavily in this part of the world. Couple other things I want to say by way of introduction about it. First of all, it's not a magic wand. So my apologies to anyone that has joined today hoping that there might be a magic button in NVivo that's going to analyze all your qualitative data instantly for you. It does not do that. So NVivo is essentially a database application, and it's going to help you store, manage, and retrieve your qualitative information, but you do the work as the researcher. So that means you are deciding what your codes are, you're developing those codes into themes, you're the person that's writing up the analysis that you've developed in the software later down the track. So it's very much you in the driving seat, which I am actually very reassured by. So as a qualitative researcher, I hate the thought of software or even AI tools doing the work for me. I think that really needs to be something we do ourselves as human researchers. Now, because you are the person doing the work here, that means that NVivo can be used for any qualitative methodology or data analysis approach that you might be following. So whether you are doing a thematic analysis project, grounded theory, content analysis, narrative, discourse analysis, or something else entirely, it is absolutely possible to use NVivo for those purposes. Now, if those numerous data analysis approaches I just rhymed off sound like gobbledygook to you, just a heads up that it would definitely be worth learning a little bit about how to analyze qualitative data before you use the software, because it's not doing the work for you. So you need a reasonable grounding of how the qual analysis process works. Okay. Other thing to say would be versions. So I will be presenting with NVivo 15 for Windows. NVivo 15 is the most recent version of the software. It is available for Windows and Mac, but I'm primarily a Windows user, so that's the version I'll be using today. Some of you might be on version 14, very little difference across those two versions. The main difference with NVivo 15 was that a new AI assistant was added, but most of the New Zealand universities and other organisations haven't granted access to that AI assistant at this stage. So that does actually mean that, to all intents and purposes, version 14 and 15 are the same. Just a reminder, folks, I'm trying hard not to get too distracted by the chat, but I can see it's quite busy. So if you have a question today, please locate the Q&A panel on your toolbar in Zoom. If you click on the Q&A option, it should pop up a window, and questions are really, really welcome in regards to anything I'm covering today or anything about NVivo. So any questions at all, pop those in the Q&A. If Jane's able to, she'll answer it via the Q&A panel as we go, and otherwise I will tackle questions at the end. Okay. Let's talk about what I'm showing on screen. So we are in the sample project for NVivo, the environment change project that Jane and I were chatting about just before we started today. That comes with NVivo, so you will have access to that when you install the software. And in terms of getting access to the software, folks, best place to start is to check to see if your organisation has a licence. Most of the New Zealand universities and quite a few other organisations do have access to NVivo licences. So check there as your first port of call. And otherwise, the software vendor Lumivero, you will be able to purchase a licence from their website. I have actually got a frequently asked questions document about NVivo that covers things like versions and accessing the software. Might ask Jane just to pop that in the chat now so that if anyone else has other questions along those lines, you can have a look at that frequently asked questions document. Got another 2 PDF resources that I'm going to save to the end, by the way, folks. That's a really good reason to stay to the end of the session today. Got a couple of goodies in terms of some free NVivo resources for you that we'll share at the end of today. So I'm in NVivo 15 for Windows, sample project here, and I just thought I'd show you a few of the different types of data that NVivo allows you to work with. We won't be going through absolutely every type of data in the interest of time, but I just wanted to show you a few of the key ones. So the first one I have on screen, this is an interview transcript that comes with the sample project, and it's fairly standard sort of question and answer type format. So I'm just scrolling through here. Henry is the interviewer, Barbara is the person he's chatting to. So very standard kind of question and response type format. There is a very common perception that you need to have a special formatting approach in order to work with transcripts in NVivo. That was certainly the case back in nudist days. So very early versions of the software had a very unfortunate acronym nudist. We've got at least one ex-nudist user in the group today. If you're curious, by the way, that stands for non-numerical unstructured data, which you index, search, and theorize. That was pre-internet days that they came up with that. And of course, as soon as people started to Google things, nudist did not bring up very much around qualitative research, and so they changed the name. I know the couple that developed the software quite well, and they're quite quirky, so they liked to name their software slightly unusual names. So with the recent versions of the software, there is no need to have any special formatting whatsoever. There are some things you can optionally do in order to maximize the use of NVivo, but different colored fonts, font sizes, font choices, bold, italics, underline, all of those things are absolutely fine. Now, typically what I'd recommend is that these are transcribed outside of NVivo. You can transcribe in the software, but much more effective to transcribe, prepare your files in Microsoft Word, and then you can simply import the file across. And of course, I suspect many of you are using some of the new AI automated transcription tools that are out there. So obviously it would be a case of taking your transcripts from whatever tool you're using and just doing a little bit of data cleaning in Microsoft Word before you bring it across. I think some of these new AI transcription tools, they've clearly really increase the level of accuracy that we can get from those sorts of tools, but you still definitely need to check the data. With any data analysis software, it's always a case of garbage in, garbage out. So make sure that you do clean your files really well before you bring them into NVivo. So we have got an interview transcript by way of example. I've also got the video clip of Ken with his noisy dogs that I mentioned earlier. So audio and video files are both able to be imported to NVivo. You can see that we've got the video file just sitting in the bottom left here, and running along the top is a fairly standard sort of timeline or waveform that you'd expect with video or audio data. You can play this video in NVivo, you can code the video directly, but this particular one also has a transcript attached to it off on the side. It is a little bit of work to set this sort of thing up. So people are often quite attracted to the idea of having their audio and video files inside NVivo linked to the transcript. But given the amount of work involved in setting that up, I would really only recommend doing that if things like tone of voice or body language or other aspects that wouldn't be captured by a verbatim transcript, if any of those are important, absolutely worth setting this up. But otherwise, I'd recommend just typing your audio and video files up in a Microsoft Word document and bringing those across. Right, next file I'm going to show, and we will be getting more into working with PDFs of literature in tomorrow's session. So Jane and I will be back 11 o'clock New Zealand time tomorrow. Jane will drop the link for that in the chat. If you haven't signed up already, please feel free to do that. So PDFs in NVivo might not be literature. It could also be things like policy documents or annual reports from companies. Obviously, PDFs can take a range of different forms. But something I really like about these recent versions of NVivo is that if your original PDF is OCR, so that stands for optical character recognition, it's a fancy way of saying that the text is in the original PDF file. So if you have a PDF that when you open it, you can select the text, that means when it comes into NVivo, you are actually going to be able to very specifically select words, phrases, etc. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I did just want to show an example PDF as one of these sample data types. And the last data type I thought I'd mention today is a survey. So I mentioned before that NVivo won't really help you at all if you're working just with numbers. But often when we are working with surveys, we have a bit of a mix of some quantitative questions, often categorical data, demographics, for example. And we have these wonderful open-ended survey questions that people respond to qualitatively. So if you do have qualitative data in your surveys, NVivo is a great tool to work with that information. I do quite a lot of survey analysis in NVivo, and every time I use it, I'm blown away by how helpful it is. So this particular example survey, the columns you can see here that have got a white background, they are the open-ended comment responses to the survey, and the grey shaded backgrounds are the more categorical or demographic type questions. We are actually going to be working with one of these questions later on today. So I will just show you here that this particular survey has got a column for age. So remember that for something I'll be doing later today. Okay, now these aren't the only data types that are possible. The frequently asked questions document that Jane shared in the chat will cover the other options. Jane and I would love to know though, because we're curious types, what kind of data are you going to be working with? Let us know in the chat. Have you got transcripts of interviews or focus groups? Have you maybe got a survey with open-ended responses? Maybe you're really early stages and you're not sure. Maybe you're not actually working with qualitative data and you just came today out of interest. So let Jane and I know in the chat. We'd love to hear. So we've got quite a few people working with interview, transcripts, few surveys, focus groups, all oral histories. That's a really interesting type of data to be working with. Policy docs. Gosh, we've got the full range there, Jane, haven't we? Fabulous. Okay. Great stuff. Thanks for that, folks. Right. Once you have your data, whatever data type you're working with in NVivo imported in, probably the next stage of the process will be coding that information in some way. So what I'm just going to do, I'll have a bit of a tidy up here. I'm just going to close down a few of these tabs. And I'll just come back to my Barbara document. I'm going to jump across. I've got an area down the left-hand side here for code. So I'm just going to move across to that. So the sample project has the coding pretty much completed. Obviously, you're going to need to do the hard yards yourself in terms of deciding what your codes are and doing the actual work of coding in NVivo. But the sample project is really great for looking at what a completed project looks like and getting a sense of how they've set this up and what coding actually looks like in the software as well. So this particular project, I've got 32 codes showing on screen here. Some of them are nested in little hierarchies. So you can see here I've got natural environment with some subcodes off that. The language that NVivo uses here is a little bit unusual. They talk about parent and child codes. So that's how they refer to these hierarchies. And the numbers you see here, the files column is the number of files that have been coded at that specific code. And references is the number of pieces of data that have been coded. That's usually chunks of text, but if you are working with other data types, it's the number of times information has been coded. And those numbers, I'm not a huge fan of actually citing those numbers in any analysis or writing work that I'm doing. I don't really think that's where the gems are on a qualitative project, but they are really, really helpful for looking for patterns and giving you an overall sense of the coding in your project. So how did that coding happen? Probably with hours and hours and hours of work would be my guess. But in terms of the technical side of things in NVivo, what I thought I'd do is just show you one coding technique in the interest of time today. I'm going to be completely biased and show you my favorite coding technique, which is drag and drop. So I'm just scrolling down. I'm looking for question 2 of Barbara. And there's a little chunk of text there that I thought I would code at this code you can see for balance. So coding in NVivo is as simple as reading your data, having a look at what's there, deciding which code a particular piece of text belongs to, and then dragging and dropping to that code. So I'm just going to hover over what I've selected. I'm going to drag and drop and pull over to balance and let go. And the sharp-eyed amongst you might have noticed that the number of references has increased by 1 there. So that's gone up to 17 references. I will show you inside that code in a moment so that you get a sense of what that looks like. But that coding technique I've just shown you, we were coding at a code that was already there in our system. So did want to point out that you can code in NVivo both deductively and inductively. If you're not familiar with those two terms, deductive codes are the ones you create ahead of time. So they're the things you know beforehand. Inductive codes you make up from the data. So inductive codes are the ones you make as you engage, as you work with your data. It's going to depend on your data analysis approach as to which one of those you follow. So something like grounded theory, for example, would typically be inductive. If you're taking a mixed methods approach and trying to confirm something from your quant, you may take a more deductive approach. Must say, in reality, most of the researchers I work with do a bit of a mix of both of those techniques. There's some things they know ahead of time, so they make those beforehand. There's other things that surprise them in the data, and they make those as they go. So NVivo will support both of those techniques. I've shown you the deductive technique. I'm going to show you how we might do that inductively as well. And so I'm actually also going to code this chunk of text to a code for local connection. And I don't have a code for local connection at the moment. So what I'm going to do is just drag and drop to the white space. And I'll type in local connection and click OK. And you can see I've now got an inductive code has been created with 1 file, 1 reference. So it's made the code and done the coding for me at the same time. So that also answers a question I think I spotted in the Q&A. Can you code one piece of data to more than one code? Absolutely. And that's a real benefit of using NVivo over pen and paper or manual methods. Very, very normal for qualitative data to belong in multiple places. And I love the fact that we're able to do that so easily in NVivo. Now let's show you what a completed, I'm not sure qualitative coding is ever fully complete, but a complete-ish code. I'll just open up that balance code that we started with. So I'm just double-clicking that to open it up. I might just scroll down a little bit just to give you a sense. So These are all of the pieces of data from this particular project that related to this code, this idea for balance. And you can see they're all here together in one place for us to then work with. So really, really easy when you're at the writing up stage of your project, you're wanting to write up a particular code or theme to be able to open these up and review the coding. Now, there's a couple of other things I wanted to talk about in relation to working with coding, and I'll just close down this balance code and just bring that in a little bit. So one of the things that's quite useful in NVivo is to review your data and have a look at all the different places that the file has been coded. And that's really, really easy to do via something called coding stripes. I'm going to turn coding stripes on for this Barbara transcript to show you what they look like. So when I turn that on, you will see some coloured stripes down the right-hand side. And of course, it's only Jane and I on webcam today, but I suspect all of you are sort of doing this to try and frantically read what is down there. So these coloured stripes match the text that you can see on screen. So I'm just hovering over this one here. There's a red stripe for the positive code. And when I hover over it, you can see the text is highlighted. I've got economy here, that's coming up in green, and that little bit of coding I just showed you, balance, if I hover over here, you can see that that has come up also. So coding stripes are a really wonderful way to review a data file, look at all the different places that that has been coded, and just get a sense of your coding from there. The other great way that you can work with your coding is any coding that you've done will always link back to the original source file. So just to show you what that would look like, because it's one of those things, me saying that may sound a little bit abstract, so let's show you a concrete example. Might actually open up policy management here. And once that opens up, just scroll down, let's find one of the interviews, maybe next to Maria and Daniel. So we're looking inside the code here. I can see all of the bits of data that have been coded here. And sometimes when you're reviewing your coding, you discover that you've maybe coded a little bit too specifically. And often I look and I think, oh, I wonder what was said just before or just after that piece of coding. So one of my absolute favorite features of NVivo, and it's such a little thing, but I think it's often the simple things that make the difference. I can look at this text that I've coded and I can right click over top, and there's an option here, open referenced file. And if I click on that, that will take me back to the Maria and Daniel transcript, and I can see that piece of coding highlighted in the context that it came from. Now, those of you that are newer to qualitative analysis might not be that grabbed by that feature, but I bet those of you who have a bit of experience under your belt are very excited about seeing that. It is absolutely worth its weight in gold. As I say, it's a very simple function of the software, but it is immensely useful when you're at the stage of reviewing your coding. Now, the final thing I'll show you in relation to working with codes, let's close down the tabs that are open. So one of the most useful aspects of working with codes in NVivo is the fact that you can export out something called a code book. Now, a code book in NVivo, it's one of those terms that has lots of different names that mean essentially the same thing. You see that a lot in qualitative research. So a code book is sometimes referred to a coding framework, an analysis framework, or a coding template. It's essentially a list of your codes and definitions or descriptions for each code. And they're a really, really helpful thing to have in a qualitative project. They help you code in a consistent manner. They're great to share with your supervisors, for those of you that are postgraduate students, or teammates, for those of you that might be working in a qualitative team. And I've got to say, for me, as I get older and my memory gets not as good as it used to be, I find them really helpful just for memory purposes. So codes are often quite abstract, fuzzy concepts, and we always know exactly what we mean at the time that we enter them. But sometimes over time, that understanding can either shift or sometimes for me completely disappear, I must admit. So entering in descriptions for my codes is a really great way to make sure I can remember what it is that I'm coding. So I'll just show you an example of one of those. The sample project doesn't have a huge amount of descriptions entered, but I've just gone into the properties of one of these codes, and you can see it's there. When I bring the code book up in a moment, you'll see that these aren't entered for every single code, which, as I say, is not the best example, but there's enough of these entered in to make this a useful thing to demonstrate. Now, you can make or enter these descriptions at the time that you create the code. There's a dialog box when you go ahead and create it. Otherwise, if you've used a coding technique that doesn't give you an opportunity to enter a description in, you can do what I've just done, right click over top and go into, on Windows, it's the code properties dialog box. On the Mac, annoyingly, it's get info is the option. I don't know why they've made that inconsistent. It's very strange. The main point I'm making there, folks, though, is it's really, really useful to enter descriptions in, and I'll show you how you can export these out. I'll just cancel off this. And I'm just going to come up to the Share tab of the ribbon, and there's an option, Export Codebook. Now, I'll untick these two folders. They're more sort of administrative codes in NVivo, and I'll click OK. And it may, oh no, there we go. It's opened it up on the right screen today. Fabulous. So we've now got a Microsoft Word document open. It's got the codes in the first column and these descriptions that I mentioned in the second column. And if I scroll through, you can see there are indeed a few missing for this particular project. So this is the kind of thing, I always have it printed off in front of me when I'm coding in NVivo. I find it really helpful and quick to refer to. And because this exports as Microsoft Word, for those of you that are postgrad students that possibly your supervisors aren't using NVivo, this is a really great thing that you can just simply attach to an email and send to them. And it gives them a really good understanding of what your codes are and what framework you're coding to. Okay, right. We are going to move across to some of the, I often call these the whiz bang or the bells and whistles feature of NVivo, but let's just check in. Jane, how are we going in the chat and the Q&A? Is there anything that...
I wonder if you could quickly show everyone just how you set up a new code, because
yeah, sure,
something that's come up in the Q&A.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So I am a huge fan of right-clicking in NVivo. So I highly encourage everyone to do some training if you're thinking about using NVivo for your research. But for those that just like to get in and click around in software, key to using NVivo well is just try right-clicking and see what comes up. So I am just going to here, right-click in the white space, and you can see there's an option, New Code. On the Mac, it's actually New Top-Level Code. And if I click on that now, and it brings up the dialog box. I'll not be very original. I'll just call this Test Code. And you can see the box there for description also. And I'll click on OK. And you can see that that is appearing in the list of codes now. So it's that straightforward. The actual mechanics of setting up codes in NVivo, it really is very, very simple. The hard part is, and I think the fun part as well, can I say, the harder part is actually you figuring out what the codes are for your project. And that is, just to emphasize that again, apologies for sounding like a broken record, but that is you as the researcher that decides what the codes are going to be for your project. Having said that, I am about to show a couple of tools that might help you figure out what your codes are, but ultimately it's your call as the researcher what your codes might be. Okay. Well, thanks for suggesting that, Jane. I think that was a useful thing to do. Let's talk about what you can do in NVivo that might help you come up with some of your code. So one of the features of NVivo that can be really helpful for this is the queries functionality. Queries are ways of asking questions in your NVivo project, and you can ask questions about your text, or you can ask questions about the coding that you've done. So I'm going to show you a coding query at the end of today's session, but text queries are a really useful thing to do when you're at the stage of coming up with ideas for your codes. There's two types of queries that relate to text. You can look for very specific instances of words or phrases, but the one that I thought I'd show you this morning is something called a word frequency query, and that will look for the most frequently occurring words in your data. Now, just because a word occurs more frequently doesn't necessarily mean it's important. You might actually get words like and are coming up as being the most frequent, for example. But this can be a really useful way to get familiar with your data. And as I say, can be helpful for ideas for codes as well. Right. Let's run this word frequency query so you can see what it's like. I'm going to pop up to the Explore tab of the ribbon here. You can see there is a handy little button for word frequency. So I'm just going to click on that. And I will make a couple of changes here. By default, it looks for the 1,000 most frequent, which is quite a lot. So I'm just taking a 0 off. We'll ask it to show us the 100 most frequently occurring words. Also going to change here the minimum length. So what's that about? So minimum length is the minimum number of characters in the word that must be present for it to be counted. So I'm essentially asking it to only count words that are 4 letters or longer. Now, NVivo has something called a stop words list, and that will automatically exclude words like and, the, if, not. All those kind of words are already excluded. But obviously there are sometimes shorter words that might not be in that list that you might want to exclude. Think very carefully about your own data when you're deciding on the minimum length there, because sometimes you're particularly interested in things like 3-letter acronyms, for example. So I usually set my minimum length to 5 or 6, depending on the data, but I think 4 for this particular project is a good length. So I'm going to ask NVivo to run this just by clicking on the Run Query button in the top right. And here we have a list of the 100 most frequently occurring words. Now, I can't see your faces right now, but I'm going to pick there's probably a 50-50 split. Some of you are probably delighted by that list, and the more qual people in the group might be frowning and very disapproving, which I must admit I am in the latter camp. I'm not a fan of quantifying qualitative information unless your data analysis approach is specifically suited to that. This particular query, though, is about so much more than just the numbers. So I'm going to show you a couple of quick things here. First of all, the frequency counts here, it really is an excellent starting point. Regardless of the data analysis approach that you're using, chances are data familiarization is going to be step 1 of the process. And this is a great way to get familiar with your data, just getting a sense for the most frequent, least frequently occurring words. What is fabulous to me, though, is the fact that you can double click on any of these words. And I'm going to do that here on loggerhead. So that occurs 77 times. Just double click that. And it will open up. Just having a bit of a think about it there. Okay, great stuff. So it's essentially taking me through to the context that that particular word occurred in. So I've got the word loggerhead, 5 words context either side. So it's not necessarily about the fact that the word occurred 77 times. It's around how people actually used the term. And for me as a qualitative researcher, that is much more interesting than the frequency count. Other quick thing I'm going to show you, and then I think Jane and I would love to hear what you think of that particular query, because it's always a mix of different opinions. A lot of the queries in NVivo have visualizations associated with them, and I thought I'd just show one of these today. So there is a word cloud option. So I firmly believe a picture paints 1,000 words, and I'm always very keen to view my qualitative information in multiple ways. What I often find is when I look at my word list and then I look at the visual that I currently have on the screen, I sometimes spot words that I didn't see when I was just looking at the list. So I think the more ways you can interact, engage with your qualitative data, the better. If you're not familiar with word clouds, essentially this is showing me the words that occur more frequently are in a larger font. Just to save Jane a little bit of work answering questions, I'm going to head off the inevitable question that will get asked, which is, can these be exported? Yes, they can. So anything in NVivo is exportable with a right click. So if you do want to include this in any presentations you might be giving or elsewhere, I do have a right click export word cloud option there for you. I wouldn't recommend putting these in academic writing that you're doing. They're not a form of analysis. It's just a really quick visual, primarily for your purposes. But I do think that they are really useful for PowerPoint slides and other less formal presentation formats. Now, Jane and I would love to hear what you think of the word frequency query, either the counts themselves, the ability to go to context, the word cloud that was showing on the screen. Pop a quick message in the chat just to let us know your thoughts. And if it's not your cup of tea, we'd love to hear that as well. So there's heaps of different tools in NVivo, which is partly the reason for having a showcase session this morning. Some of them will resonate with you, others won't. It would be great just to get a sense for what you think of that. So I will just pause for a moment before I move on to the next feature. So what have we got? Yep, visual alternative. Word clouds seem pretty popular so far. No surprises there. Best response I ever had to showing this was a PhD student at Victoria University. When I showed this in a workshop, his response was, "That's so cool, I can finally make a t-shirt out my PhD." I'm not sure if he ever actually did that, but it was the best response I ever had to this. Oh, I love that from Gabriella, using the word cloud as a conversation starter before starting a presentation or topic to discuss with her research group. Fabulous. So the word cloud feature is not new in NVivo 15. It's been around since about version 9, if memory serves, actually. So if you are on a Mac, it will be in a slightly different location. So if you're on NVivo 14, you do have access to the word cloud, but it's sort of in the top left corner here, roughly where minimum length is showing on my screen. Let us know in the Q&A echo if you still can't find it. Okay, let's move on. I've got a couple quick things left to show you, and I do want to leave 5 minutes at the end, if I can, to take any final questions that you may have. So that was one option for possibly coming up with ideas for codes. The other thing you can do, and this is another one of the visualizations in NVivo. NVivo has a whole heap of different visualizations. They are primarily for thinking purposes. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend the NVivo visuals for any academic published writing that you're doing, but they are incredibly useful for your thinking process. And there are 3 types of maps in NVivo. I'm just going to show you one of them this morning in the interest of time. I'm going to quickly show a mind map. So I mentioned before the way to do almost everything in NVivo is a right click. So I've just right clicked in the white space there. I'll ask for a new mind map. And this is going to be sense of community. And I'll just click on OK. And in terms of what mind maps are, they're essentially a tool that allow you to brainstorm ideas, primarily brainstorming ideas for your codes, but they can be used for other purposes. So this one is about sense of community. And what I'm going to do is just add a few sub-ideas off that. So I'm going to use the insert key on my keyboard to get a sub-idea. And one of these is going to be local connection. I'll press enter again, and I've got another idea. Local identity, and we'll put just one more in, local knowledge. Okay, so you can imagine you could be, as a solo researcher, just sitting and thinking about your data, reflecting on it, popping your different ideas in, or you might do this together with your supervisors or with your research team. I've used this a lot in qualitative research teams when we're at the stage of coming up with ideas for codes, and it's really, really helpful. Best aspect of this particular tool is when you have visually mapped out what your codes might be, there is a little button here on the ribbon for creators codes or cases. So you can visually create it. I'll hit that button on the ribbon. I'll ask for it to be created in my codes, click OK. And if I now come back to my codes area, it has actually just created those codes for me directly from the map that I created. I would need to go back in as a second step and add the descriptions, but that's a very quick way to create codes. And I do particularly like that feature. That was something I'd been requesting for a very, very long time in NVivo, and I was delighted when they finally introduced it. Now I'll show one more visualization and then we'll finish with that coding query that I promised, and then we'll be into questions. I'll close down the mind map. And I wanted to talk about some of the diagrams that can be created. So the one that I've selected is something called an explore diagram. It's nice and quick to create, and it's an excellent way for you looking for connections in your NVivo projects. Those of you that are more experienced with the software may not be familiar with this particular tip, which is if you right-click on top of any data file or any code in NVivo, there's always a visualize option. And it is well worth exploring the different options that are available from that. There are charts you can create, there's comparison diagrams. The one that I thought I'd show you is this one here, explore diagram. So basically I'm asking NVivo here to explore the Helen interview file. So there you go, you can see that's very quickly opened up. So this shows me Helen's file in the center, and I've got all of the items on the outside that Helen's file is connected to. I might be interested in looking at this balance code. Remember, we were looking at balance earlier when I covered coding. And what I can actually do, up here on the ribbon, there's an option change focus. So I'll click on that. That will actually make balance in the center now, and I can see all of the items that are connected to balance. I'm looking at that, I see that William is connected to balance as well, so I might want to explore William's file. Click on change focus again, and that's going to pop William in the center, and then this suddenly gets very, very busy and overwhelming. Now, on a bigger project, this probably isn't super useful. And whenever I demonstrate this feature, I always think, Lynn, why don't you use that more on your own research? And I think the reason is that I'm often working with very, very large projects in NVivo, and unfortunately the number of connections that would appear would be really overwhelming. But I think on a smaller study, these are a great way to look for patterns, connections, experiment with hunches you might have. And one of the things that I particularly like is the fact that you can step forward and back in the diagram as well. So just up here on the ribbon, you can see a little back button. So I'm just clicking on that to jump back, and then I can go forward again if I'd like. So you can actually step back and forth and just explore some of those connections as well. Right. Last thing to show is one of the example coding queries, which I've said a few times that I have particular features of the software that I really like, and often I can hear myself and I think, gosh, people must just think I love everything in NVivo because I say it so often. But the ability to ask questions of your coding is absolutely, absolutely my favorite feature in NVivo. Now I'm going to just close this down and just talk for a minute about what we're about to do. So coding queries can only be done in NVivo once you've finished your coding. So the word frequency query I showed you before, you can run that the minute you have data in your project. As soon as you have text, you can run a word frequency query. Coding queries, you need your coding completed, and possibly, if you're planning to use them, you might need some demographic information set up as well. So I'll just show you what we're going to be querying here. So I'll come to codes, and I'm really interested in this natural environment branch. So we've got lots of people talked about the natural environment, and we've got some child codes or subcodes that relate to that idea. And I'm particularly interested in what the older people said about the natural environment to the younger people. Now, this particular sample project has got something called classification set up in it. That's a little bit beyond today's quick demo to show you how they work. But all you need to know for this demo today is that NVivo knows for the people that participated in this project what each person's age group is. So we're going to be able to ask questions about these codes against those age groups. So I'll come up to explore. There's actually two queries in NVivo that will allow you to do this. So there's a matrix coding query and a crosstab query. So either of those are absolutely fine. What I'm going to do is come to the queries button here and pick a crosstab query.
Sorry to interrupt, Flynn. I can't see your screen anymore, so I just wanted to check if other people could.
Yeah, if I stalled there briefly, it was because I saw your message in the chat. It is still showing at my end. Can I just get folks? Oh, Jane, you're special. It's just you that it's not showing.
Good thing I've seen this one before.
I think you've seen this multiple times. So thank you for letting me know, though, Jane, because that wouldn't have been a good finish to the session. This is my main demo. This is the thing that I really want people to see. Imagine if screen share hadn't worked. So folks, thank you so much for letting me know in the chat that we're all good on that front. So showing a crosstab query, just select that off the list. And what I'm going to do is just take these codes and I'll drag and drop them into the codes panel here. So there we go. I've got my codes. And then what I'll do is find the age group. So just clicking on this drop down here and selecting age group. I feel like I've talked this one up so much now, Jane. I'm going to be really disappointed if folk aren't excited about it. Or even need a bit of a drum roll here, possibly. So I'm asking about natural environment against age group. Let's click on run query. And we'll have a look at what we've got. Now, might actually be easiest. I will just flick this round the other way for you. It's a bit hard to see in this format. And I'm just scrolling across because most of the coding has been done here at the water quality code. So what I'm looking at here is for these codes relating to the natural environment, each row represents an age group. And the numbers here show me the number of times people from that age group talked about that particular code. Now, as I said before, not a huge fan of quantifying qualitative data. The best bit here is I can come, so this is the water quality code and the 40 to 49-year-olds, and I can double click on that 21, and that takes me through to exactly what people said. So this is exactly what the 40 to 49-year-olds said about water quality. I can come back to my table and I might then double click here. This is the 60 to 69-year-olds and what they said about water quality. Double click that. And there we go. So you still need to read it, unfortunately, but that ability to take coding that you've done and filter it down on particular subgroups, whether that's demographics or other descriptive information that you might have, to me, that is one of the best reasons to use NVivo if you do have a project that is suited for. I'd love to know what you think of that particular feature. Let Jane and I know in the chat. Now, I'm very much hope that has whetted your appetites and that you might be curious to learn about NVivo. So we've got folk here from all sorts of different organisations. My first suggestion is that you check to see if your organisation offers NVivo training. Most of the New Zealand universities do have NVivo training of some kind. If you are based at University of Auckland or AUT, I run the training courses there, so I look forward to possibly seeing some of you at those. For other universities, it is offered in different places at different universities. It's sometimes based in the library, sometimes your IT department, sometimes the graduate research school. Weirdly, at University of Auckland, it's located in human resources, which has always been a bit perplexing to me. So you might have to go hunting for it. But check to see if your organisation offers NVivo training in the first instance. And if it doesn't, can I suggest that you come along and join Jane and I in my Research Accelerator membership. So Jane is going to pop the link to Research Accelerator in the chat for you all. Now, Research Accelerator, it's my online membership program that I offer. It's got two components to it. It's got a massive video library, over 200 hours of training courses about NVivo, qualitative data analysis, and so much more. Downloadable PDF training manuals, exercise files, etc. The other sort of aspect to it is a very active, lively and wonderful research community that meet regularly online. We do co-working sessions, there's live Q&A with me, we do masterclasses once a month and also have quarterly research retreats, which are a huge amount of fun. So you can either sign up for the video content, you can sign up for the community, or you can sign up to both. And signing up to both really is where the magic happens. And I'm not just saying that to encourage you all to sign up. I actually have done qualitative research on it, and it was the aspect that really boosted people's learning. Now, I am very aware that research budgets are tight right now and not everyone may be in a position to sign up to a program like that. We try and make it as budget friendly as we can, but just to let you know that there is a free plan that you can sign up for. So you can actually sign up for 3 months for free, gives you access to 15 of the courses. 7 of those are NVivo. And it takes you through from very basics through to some of the more intermediate level functions of the software, gives you access to my NVivo training manual and so on. So please do take advantage of that if you're having trouble accessing NVivo training with your university. We don't bombard you with emails or anything like that. So sign up. Make the most of the free training, and if you like the look of it, you're welcome to look at some of the paid plans, but there's no obligation for signing up for the free one. I've offered that because we've just recently turned 5 years old, which I'm very excited by, and so I wanted to do something to celebrate that, so I've added a free plan option in. Now, I wanted to leave a few more minutes for questions. If anyone is heading off to a 10 o'clock meeting, feel free to head off, but I know there are a couple of quite important questions in the chat. So Jane, do you want to let me know what I haven't answered?
So there's a couple of questions that are much the same, and I think it's really important about how NVivo stores data, so that when people are thinking about ethics or thinking about data sovereignty, particularly for Māori, so if you could talk about that.
I certainly can. It's a great question. And yeah, I can see it has been asked a few times, hasn't it? Right. So your data is saved wherever you ask it to be saved. So it's not saved in the software and it's not saved in the cloud offshore unless you ask it to be. So you can absolutely meet the requirements of your local ethics committee in terms of where your research data is saved. When you create a project in NVivo, it specifically says where would you like to save the project. So you just make sure that you save it wherever you have told your ethics committee. or the research drives that your university approves for research data. And obviously, particularly for those of you here in New Zealand, your universities have some very clear guidance around where research data can be saved. So make sure you check that out and just choose that location when you're saving your project. But it's a very important one to be aware of. And I'm actually really stoked, Jane, that so many people ask that. That's a really good sign. A couple of other quick questions I see. What do you think, Jane? Shall we just go a couple minutes over?
I love that question about common mistakes that people make.
Yeah, I do too. Right. So the question is, what are some common mistakes that people make when using NVivo for coding and how to avoid them? Most common mistake that I see people make is having too many codes. I've seen projects that have had literally thousands of codes in them. And it comes from the fact that with qualitative software, it's actually so easy to make codes and do coding that people get very carried away. When we had highlighter pens, you might have had 12 different colors, so you had 12 codes and that was it. But with qualitative software, people can get very, very carried away and end up with codes within codes within codes. So I can't give you a magic number today in terms of the number of codes your project should have. Most NVivo projects have around 30 to 50 codes, so that's 30 to 50. I've had as few as 8 and as many as 183, so huge variation there. If you are going past 100 codes, I would take a second look at what you've got. If you're going past 200 codes, I would seek expert assistance. And when I make that recommendation in workshops, I'm often asked, do I mean psychological assistance? That's not quite what I'm referring to there. Talk to your supervisors, talk to someone like me, talk to a more experienced qualitative researcher, because anything more than 200, unless that is appropriate for your particular data analysis approach, that's a bit concerning. And then the second big mistake I see people make is selecting too much text to code. So do try and code quite specifically when you work in NVivo. There's no need to take extra data because you can always get back to the source context. And sorry, one more common mistake, not leaving enough time to do coding would be my third. So yeah, it's such a great question. Couple others there.
And both of these people are still online, so it'd be great if we could answer those. Thank you.
Absolutely. And if anyone does need to slide off, the recording is still going, so you can catch the last few questions on the recording. What's the best way to view a completed coding set to view the parent and child codes in one view? Now, I'm not sure, Sarah, if you want to see the coding for both levels or just the codes. Best way to view the codes would be the exported codebook that I showed earlier. That will show you parent and child codes. Otherwise, if you're on Windows, there are a couple of reports in NVivo. I'm going to have to move my monitor off to the side so I can actually see this option. And possibly one of the coding summary options here might give you what you need. If I haven't quite answered that right, let us know, because yeah, there's a few different ways that could be answered. And then my favorite question to finish, Jane, does NVivo make themes from the codes? No, you do that yourself as the researcher. So just to make the distinction between codes and themes. So I love Brown and Clark's analogy where they talk about a brick wall. A code is an individual brick in the wall and a theme is the wall. So your themes are made up of multiple smaller codes. Your bricks create the wall. So in NVivo, you would usually be creating and working with codes. It is then your role as the researcher to develop those into themes. Now, some people like to have their parent level, the top level in NVivo, as their themes, and that works really well. I actually like to create or develop my themes outside of NVivo. So I actually take my codes off NVivo, I write the names of them on bits of card or post-it notes, and I shuffle them into lots of configurations. So it is something that requires a bit of thinking as the researcher at that stage. That is the kind of thing that you definitely learn lots about in the Research Accelerator membership. And I've just got a clarification from Sarah there. It was actually seeing it visually that she was wanting. So yes. And I'm just coming to the maps area here. A project map in NVivo will allow you to do that. So that's just opened up here. That's showing the parent and child level codes. And you can actually create that just by dragging and dropping that into the project map. That and the other visualizations are covered in one of the Research Accelerator courses that are in the free plan. So if you're wanting to learn more about that, the NVivo Visualizations course would be a great one to take a look at. And very last question, then I am going to finish us up. Pavana has asked about grey and white columns. How were the grey columns created? So that was when I did a survey in NVivo. I was showing you what a data set, a survey would look like. It's created by NVivo in short. So you don't do that as the researcher. The qualitative open-ended comments come in with the white background, and any quantitative columns come in as grey. Okay, I could sit here and answer questions about NVivo all day, Jane, couldn't I? So we probably should think about winding up. Don't forget to join us tomorrow. Jane's dropped the link in the chat. And of course, there were those 2 other PDFs that I promised if you stayed to the end. I will be including these in the email that I send, given that we went a little bit over time. So Jane's just dropping in the chat a link to my NVivo project planning worksheet. And there's also a 5 tips for NVivo. And the other resource we've just dropped in the chat, much as I love ResBaz Week, can be a bit overwhelming. And so if you are feeling, gosh, there's all these digital tools out there and I'm feeling a bit overloaded of knowing which ones to use, I have got a session next week. It's a free webinar, The Researcher's Guide to Digital Tools. So do feel free to sign up to that if you would like to. But thanks so much, Jane, for being here with me and helping out behind the scenes. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I did.
Always. Thank you, Lynn. It's been great to spend time with all 118 of you online today.
Fabulous. And thank you to all of you for joining. If you're watching the recording later, I hope you find it valuable. And Jane and I are really looking forward to seeing some of you back tomorrow. We'll hang around for a moment or so in case anyone's got any final questions, but otherwise I'll stop the recording there. Have a great day. Hope you enjoy your other ResBaz sessions if you are attending more. Go well, everyone.
Ka kite.